Let's have a look, though, at the economic consequences of the pandemic. As I mentioned earlier, the federal government is banking on Victoria moving out of lockdown in 6 weeks as it deals with the economic crisis that's now produced the 2 largest deficits since World War II. Let's cross live to Assistant Finance Minister Zed Seselja in Canberra. Thanks for joining us today, Minister. Is this an economic disaster for the country, what's been revealed today?
Well, it's a very, very significant economic challenge, Chris. There's no doubt about it. There's no sugarcoating it. This pandemic and the health response to it and the economic and financial response to it has been a major hit, obviously, to our economy and to our budget. And so the government has put those figures out there. We've never hidden the fact that this was going to be a massive challenge for us. What we can say, though, is that because of the relative strength of our balance sheet, our budgetary position and our economy going into it, we have been better placed than virtually any other nation to respond strongly, to protect the health and well-being of Australians, to protect their livelihoods. But yes, those challenges will continue for some time to come, and we're going to have to, as a nation, continue to respond very, very strongly and come up with innovative ways to continue to grow our economy into the future.
The size of the deficits, the size of the debt, the government debt, means, of course, we're going to face decades of deficit budgets now, and Australians are going to have that hanging over their heads. Our children are going to be paying taxes to try and whittle this down.
Well, as I say, Chris, there's no getting around the hit that we've experienced. We, of course, in comparison to most other countries, not only will our debt position, into the future continue to be comparatively much lower than most other countries, but indeed, because we've been able to respond in the way that we have, the economic hit, whilst very severe in this country, is considerably less than in most comparable OECD countries. So if you look, for instance, at many European nations, they expect to contract over 10%. Places like the UK, France and Italy, the average in the OECD is a contraction of about 7.5%. The contraction that we're forecasting in Australia in this calendar year is about half that. So whilst it is a very large contraction, it is comparatively much better. And so we're going to continue to focus on how we protect the health and well-being of Australians, how we grow our economy. And as we deal with that debt, we, of course, will need to grow our economy and grow jobs, and that's going to continue to be the laser-like focus of the Morrison government.
When the coalition first came into government and inherited Labor's GFC debt, you actually increased some taxes, a debt levy on high-income earners to try and start paying down debt. Yet now you're talking about cutting taxes to pay down debt. There's not much consistency there.
Well, look, we can point to all of the things that we did, including the fact that we had the lowest rate of growth in government spending in over 50 years. That was the main way we managed the budget, as well as growing the economy. We had more people in jobs, less people on welfare, and we controlled government spending. And as we go forward, growing the economy is going to be absolutely central to that. And we did take tax cuts to the last election. We had a very different approach to the Labor Party at the last election. They wanted to increase taxes across the board. We took tax cuts to the election. We've delivered those tax cuts. They're going to flow into the economy and help put more people in jobs. But we're going to have to look, obviously, at things like red and green tape. We're going to have to look at other reforms in the economy, bringing forward infrastructure programs as we are, to make sure that our economy can respond, that more Australians can be in work. And that's going to be the best way to get on top of what is, a significant challenge.
I've got to say, it makes sense. Economic growth is going to be the only way to put the debt into perspective in years to come. The Reserve Bank Governor said as much in his speech earlier this week. This, of course, also means, after the pandemic, a return to high levels of immigration.
Well, look, we'll take one step at a time. Obviously, immigration levels have, been severely impacted, as have so many other things, by this crisis. But look, immigration has always been an important part of Australia, of modern Australia. Yes, it's important to us economically, but it's important to us demographically, as we've had an ageing population. We've put some limits around that, which we think were sensible pre-pandemic, because we want to make sure that the immigration program is right for Australians. And so at some point it will get back to a new normal, and to rates of immigration that are in the best interest of Australia.
Zed Seselja, the thing that worries me about what we heard today from Josh Frydenberg is that the estimates are that we're on our way out of this, that Victoria's lockdown will end after 6 weeks, that other states won't go into lockdown, and we start to climb out of this from here. Yet the pandemic is still creating chaos around the world. The virus is going nowhere. We may not have a vaccine for years, if ever. We can't afford to go back into lockdown because we just can't. These levels of expenditure are just unsustainable.
Well, that's one of the reasons, of course, Chris, that it's so important that we maintain control of the health issues, and we've always argued that we want to protect the lives of Australians and also protect their livelihoods. And at every stage, we've been very cautious in the way, as we've worked with the National Cabinet to make sure that any restrictions on economic activity are only done for as long as is absolutely necessary.
Excuse me to interrupt. The point is here, the way to control the virus is to shut down the economy. We've seen that time and time again. And you're expecting you won't have to shut down after the Victoria. Does that mean, to get to the nub of this, does it mean in the future, if we get more outbreaks, we're just going to have to deal with them, learn to live with the virus, because we just can't afford to keep shutting down the economy?
Well, we certainly have to focus on, living with the virus until there is a vaccine, and ensuring that as we respond to it, we do it through things like testing, through things like tracing, and in getting on top of it. Now, of course, there are some particular challenges in Victoria at the moment, but, you talk about forecasts. Obviously, early on in this pandemic, we had worse forecast than what we've had. We've achieved much better outcomes, both in controlling the pandemic and also in some of the flow-on economic consequences. So the intent going forward, of course, would be to continue to control it, and that will change, as you rightly point out, in the way that we live with it and deal with it, but also then continuing to open up the economy, as we are seeing in large chunks of the country, notwithstanding that Victoria is facing some very, very real and significant challenges right now.